Hey guys, welcome back to FreckleFace Finance, where we discuss personal finances open and honestly so that you can live the life that you deserve. So I think that today's video is so needed amongst the federal government community because if you are anything like I was when I first started in federal government, which was well over 10 years ago, believe it or not, is that there is not a lot of hand-holding, there's not a lot of thorough information, and the onboarding process is very scattered and there's gaps. So I think that today's video is so necessary amongst federal service employees because if your onboarding process was anything like my onboarding process, you have a lot of questions. I felt like it was moving so fast and I didn't really know what type of questions to ask. So there was just tons and tons of gaps. And so now that I have over 10 years of federal government experience, I now feel like I'm more equipped to help you guys answer some of those questions so that you can have a successful first year of federal service. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, just keep on watching. So these tips aren't in any specific order, but they all are very necessary for your key success for your first year of service. So without further ado, let's get into it. So tip number one, understand your position description, also known as a PD. So your position description should detail very specifically what your roles and responsibilities are for the current position that you hold. And so a lot of the times agencies will do position descriptions based off series. And so for example, 0343 is project management series, 0080 is security, 2210 is IT. They may give you a position description based off your series, but there should also be a position description that is going to detail specifically what your roles and responsibilities are according to the position that you're currently seated in. And so the reason why it's important to have your position description for your actual job is one, so that you can make sure that your job duties and responsibilities are within scope of that PD. And two, you want to make sure that you can do everything that is outlined in that PD. And this is going to CYA, otherwise known as, which is a very popular term used within federal government. Now, in the early stages of federal government, you may not see the importance in making sure that your job responsibilities are defined in the scope of your PD, but it's going to get really important the further in your career that you go. And so this is important because your performance plan is going to be based off your PD, or at least it should be. So having access to your PD should prevent managers from adding roles and responsibilities on your performance plan that far exceed the scope of your PD. So for example, and this is going to be a little extreme, but bear with me. If you are a management analyst and your position description states that you are to build out PowerPoint presentations and make sure that calendars align for different projects within your office, but your supervisor is writing your performance plan to now have you conduct compliance inspections and brief at the Pentagon or something like that. And so if that's the case, the performance element on your performance plan is not within scope of your PD. And so that may be something that you want to bring up to management. So having access to your PD, it allows you to CYA if there's ever a discrepancy between your performance plan and your position description. So it's always nice to just have that in your back pocket. I personally always ask for a PD whenever I'm new to a position or I promote into a different position. And that's because I don't want to wait until I'm in a position to need the PD and then for whatever reason management can't find it. Whenever I'm in a new position, I always think that that's a great time to open the conversation with your manager to make sure that you get a copy of your PD. That way it opens up communication in the beginning so that you and your manager are on the same page of what your roles and responsibilities are and what the requirements are in order for you to meet a successful performance plan. So speaking of performance plan, that leads into my next tip of knowing what the minimum requirements are in order for you to meet a satisfactory rating on your performance plan. So different agencies may have different requirements on where they actually input the performance plan, but the overall requirements of the performance plan are going to be the same no matter what agency you're with. So at the beginning of the rating period, there's going to be a meeting between you and your supervisor that the supervisor is going to outline very specifically what the requirements are of your performance plan and what you need to do, or at least they should be doing this, what you need to do in order to meet a satisfactory rating at the end of the performance cycle. And so I know that may sound like a lot, but pretty much this is going to be a contract between you and your supervisor that is going to detail pretty much what you need to do in order to be successful at your job and not get in trouble. And so the position description and the performance plan go hand in hand, because your position description is going to have an overarching roles and responsibilities of all the tasks you can do under that job series. And then your performance plan is going to dictate specifically what you do while you're seated in the seat and what your supervisor expects of you. So typically your performance plan is going to have at least 3 objectives, and they're going to touch on at least 3 different elements. So one of the elements is typically going to be a technical element. They're going to have some type of element that's going to be based on training, and then some type of element that is going to be based on ethics. This is typically what I've seen throughout my experience with the federal government. Now, you may have it laid out in a different format, you may call it something different, but typically it's going to have a technical aspect, training, and some type of ethical aspect when it comes to your performance plan. So at the end of the rating cycle, you as an employee are going to have to write a summary or an employee input of how you think you did according to whatever your performance objectives are throughout the year. And so in order to facilitate a smooth closeout at the end of the year, at the end of each week, I send myself an email of my top 3 accomplishments throughout the week. And so I'll post like a quick little template up here, but pretty much I just highlight this is what it was, these were the dates it was, and this is the impact that it had to the organization. And so I typically would just email that to myself within the same email chain, so I'm just replying. And there are, I'm sure, easier ways that you can do that. So if you just want to have a Word document, I'm sure that helps as well. But I just like to timestamp because I just always CYA. So I just like to timestamp my accomplishments, any big ups that my supervisor might have gave me that week. It's kind of like my own work journal entry that I send to myself and that I use at the end of the year so that I can write a great performance element or input for myself. Now, is this a little OD? Yes. Does this prevent me from getting into some sticky situations? Yes. Now, you may not need to take this extreme approach, but I do recommend that you document, at least within your employee's internal system, just little notes to yourself that, for one, it makes it easier at the end of the year, and 2, you have it documented of your performance and your progress throughout the year. You can thank me later. So number 3, pay attention to your probationary period. And when I say probationary period, I also mean the vesting period for your TSP account. So when you sign your new hire paperwork, there's going to be some type of language that's going to discuss your probationary period, unless you have negotiated that out of your contract, but more than likely it's going to be in there. So for new federal government employees, your probationary period is going to be anywhere between 2 and 3 years. And so what that probationary period means is that the extreme job protection benefits that federal government employees love is not afforded to you because you are on a probationary period. What that means is that there are less hoops for your employer to jump through in order to terminate you from your position. And so each agency is going to be different on what is grounds for removal from your position. So typically during this probationary period, you're not going to want to get written up. I mean, you don't want to get written up anyways, but definitely not during this probationary period because it may be immediate grounds for removal. You're not going to be able to be on a PIP, so a performance improvement plan, which is often afforded to permanent federal government employees. It's pretty much a plan between you, HR, and your supervisor, where your supervisor is saying that they're unsatisfied with your performance and they have now gone to HR, and HR and your supervisor have come up with a plan for you to improve your performance. Now, when you're on that performance improvement plan, you have to meet the requirements and stipulations of the PIP in order to be removed off of it, and it's typically going to be a 90-day period. Now, when you're on a probationary period, you don't get 90 days to correct your performance. It's just going to be a grounds for automatic removal. So you're not being afforded the luxury to try to correct whatever it is that your supervisor has an issue with. Now, in that same vein, I group vesting along with the probationary period for federal government employees. And so vesting is not related to performance, but it's actually related to retirement. And so vesting means that you have a specific number of years that you have to work for a company in order to keep the employer's contribution to your retirement. So in this case, our retirement plan is the TSP. And so in order for you to be vested in the TSP, you have to work for the federal government for 3 years. And so what this means is that if you contribute 5% to your TSP and your employer matches your 5%, you don't get to keep the employer's match of the 5% until you have completed 3 years in the federal government, which means that your account has now been vested. And so a bonus tip for incoming federal government employees is that once you start with the federal government, plan to stay 3 years. There are just so many additional benefits that you get once you make it past the 3-year mark that I really feel like it's a waste of your time if you don't stay at least 3 years. So So for example, not only will you make it past the probationary period and your account becomes vested, you also, if you ever leave the federal government, you will be able to apply as a formal federal government employee, which makes it a lot easier to come back in the government. Now, if you don't make it to 3 years, you never made it past your probationary period. And so when you apply for federal government jobs in the future, you're gonna have to apply as a regular US citizen and not a prior formal federal government employee. So not only will it be easier to come back to the federal government, but you're gonna lose all the money that the employer has contributed on your behalf. So if you are accepted into federal service, I definitely recommend that you at least make it to 3 years. Now, in that same vein, you don't have to stay within the same agency for those 3 years. I do think that it's going to be difficult for you to transfer to another agency while you're on promotion because you have to apply as a regular US citizen and not a current or formal federal government employee. But if you get offered a position while you're on probationary period at another agency, you can accept that new job. And if that's the case for you, I definitely recommend that you negotiate to not start your probationary period over. So that's just an FYI. So tip number 4 for new incoming federal government employees is to be patient and be willing to learn. So I don't know if this is the case for everyone, but at least everyone that I have talked to, and myself included, it takes years to learn your job. And I know that that can be so discouraging if you're the type of person that just likes to hit the ground running and you want to know everything there is about your job and you just want to excel. That's not the case with federal government positions, unfortunately. So more times than not, when you get into a new federal government position, you're coming into that position and there's not going to be any documented procedures. There's not going to be any formalized processes that they're actually sticking to. And then more than likely, you guys are going to be understaffed, and or there could be someone who's there who is just dead weight. So there is just not a lot of like hands-on training in the beginning stages. A lot of the times federal government positions are what are considered OJT, which is on the job training. And I think that this is a very thorough way to train people, but it also takes the longest. So don't think that you're gonna get into the position and you're just gonna be this, outstanding person and you know everything, because y'all, it takes a lot of patience to be a federal government employee. There is so much to learn about your position. You typically would have a wide area of responsibility. And for the most part, what I have seen is that supervisors know that, other employees know that, and they want to help you. And so the learning curve is typically pretty big, but it's worth it if you can stick it out. So don't get overwhelmed if you've just been thrown into a position and you feel like you have no idea what's going on. I've been there, and if you stick it out, it is totally worth it. And if not, once you make it past your 3 years, you can go to a different agency. So number 5, last but definitely not least, what my agency would call, be aware of your fireable offense list. So your agency may have a fireable offense list. They may also call this list the ethical restrictions list, but be aware of what your agency considers a fireable offense and don't do none of the things on that list. So being a federal government employee, there are a ton, like more than I've ever seen in any other job. There are a tons of job protections, but if you do anything on that fireable offense list, it's out. Like, you don't pass go, you go straight to jail, you don't collect your $200, you just done. So some of the things that may be on this list are gonna be time and attendance issues, like any type of time and attendance fraud is, they just gonna let you go. And any type of government charge card, so like if you travel for your job, if you misuse that government travel card, they're not gonna give you no second chances. And then the third one that's just very prominent in my mind is if you misuse that IT equipment that they may give you, no second chances. So time and attendance, which is fraud, right? Government travel card, which is fraud. And then misuse of the IT equipment. So if you're doing something dumb on your laptop, depending on what it is, I've seen them give second chances for like minor things. And when I say minor, I mean like maybe checking your bank account on your, GFE, government furnished equipment, or social media or something like that. I consider those minor offenses. But if you like looking at videos and stuff that you shouldn't be looking at, misuse of government equipment, no second chances. So as long as you steer clear of that fireable offense list, you should be fine. Alrighty guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I tried to give you 5 really good tips, in order to make your first year of federal service a success. If you're watching this and you have any questions, just leave me a comment down below and we can continue the conversation there. I'm hoping that this video, even if I'm not able to answer your agency specific question, I'm hoping that this video brings awareness, so maybe someone else in the comments is from your agency and they can answer the questions as well. So as always, I really enjoy making these videos. If you enjoyed it even a little bit, please make sure to give me a thumbs up so it can be pushed to a larger audience. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel so that you can be notified of when I make future videos. And I will see y'all in my next one. As always, take care.